Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We're so glad to welcome you as part of our community tonight. Please note that this webinar is being recorded and distributed live stream. By entering this virtual meeting room, you give your consent to be recorded and distributed by Vienna Live with Simon Moore and other third parties. If you wish to not be recorded and distributed, please go to the LinkedIn Live video feed, the link to which I've just placed in the chat room. Tonight, our featured guest is session guitarist Larry Saltzman.
Just can't kill for Jesus. There's a well on the hill. Let it be. I don't feel no heathen attempt.
Welcome, Larry.
Good to be here.
Larry, so tell us a little bit about where you come from, how your musical tastes were formed, and why you decided to become a professional session guitarist.
Right. I hail from New York City, and specifically Queens. And it's such a cliched story, but just like so many people of my generation, and you'll hear other guitar players and bass players and drummers say what I'm going to say right now is it's ridiculous. We saw the Beatles on the Ed Sullivan Show, and this was like a completely life-changing thing for us. And I was 11 at the time. I don't know what the heck I was thinking in terms of watching these four geniuses from Liverpool who were like a once-in-a-generation incredible thing. Why we all thought, it was very compelling, and we thought, let's get in on that. So the next day you were badgering your parents for an electric guitar, and then you were finding who else was in the neighborhood who might play and forming bands. And that's kind of how it happened for me. And, again, I was 11 literally, but then the years following it, being 11 and 12 and 13, I also have a sister who's 5 years my senior. And so again, when I was 11, she was 16. She was bringing in all kinds of cool records into the house because actually my parents weren't that musical, but my sister was a real kind of record collector and brought in Bob Dylan records and Beatle records and blues records and everything, folk records. So it was a different era. There was no internet. There were like 3 television channels. When you got focused on something that you loved, it was easy to get deeply into it.
Your parents didn't have any problems with that, or did they say, "Oh, that's a great idea. Here's your electric guitar"? Or and tell us about about your first realization. Okay, this is my career.
It's really strange, but kind of early on, again, when I was like 14 years old, I was thinking, wow, maybe I could have a career in music. But I knew, and my parents were not that supportive of that. And I have friends that fall into 2 categories. My colleagues fall into 2 categories. Basically, parents were very supportive and sent them to great music universities, versus parents were not supportive. And I realize now that the parents that were not that supportive, they were really looking out for you in a certain way because they know it's a hard life. And it's very questionable whether you could actually make a living as a musician. But somehow I had this realization. I remember just walking around one day in my neighborhood in Queens when I was 14 years old, and I literally had the thought of, well, somebody's got to have a career in this. Why couldn't it be me? And then I never looked back after that. And I just made moves consciously or subconsciously that would kind of get me there.
Hey, let's listen to our next excerpt. Wow. Okay. So tell us then about your first gigs and how you moved into then this role as a session guitarist. In other words, where people would hire you for individual projects to be their guitarist. Tell us about your first experiences and how you then got into that.
Right. It's a very good question. So if you're like a young person like this, and I'm talking about when I was 17, teenager kind of person, because of the record collection that we had, I was aware of this job of session musician. And actually there were one or two people in my neighborhood in Fresh Meadows, Queens, who were session musicians who were, the adults in the neighborhood, the parents. And there was a guy called Bobby Gregg, who was a drummer who played drums on Like a Rolling Stone, and another guy called Chet Amsterdam, who lived down the block, who was a bass player, played on all kinds of stuff. So I kind of, it was like sort of in the atmosphere, but I was looking at the back covers of records, and like an Aretha Franklin record or something that I really liked. And I would see, oh, look, guitar players, bass players, I had the credits listed. And I thought, wow, who are these guys and what do they get to do? They get to go around and play with these fantastic artists. So I knew that job existed and it was very appealing to me. Other people who were such fine musicians in my neighborhood, my teenage friends, they played in cover bands where you'd go to a bar. And I did that too, of course. You have to kind of do that as part of your training. But I perceived something different, that I realized that there were songwriters, and the songwriters were going in to record their music and they needed people around them. I always said that, when I was a kid, again, 16, 17, I looked at James Taylor and I thought, oh, I'll never be James Taylor. But I looked to his left and there was a guy playing an electric guitar who happened to be called Danny Korchmar. And I thought, maybe I could be that guy. And then from there, I just sort of focused on, instead of playing Eagles songs in a bar as a cover band, finding singer-songwriters, or hopefully them finding me, and focused on that kind of work, which led to eventually they went into studios to record, whether they were just demos in the beginning part of their career or records, and they would need, hopefully, people like me.
And tell us about what exactly did you bring to this then? So you had the ability to play the guitar, okay, but then what else did they? What kind of value did you bring to them when you said you need a guitarist? How did you help them beforehand?
Yeah, so it's a very sensitive thing. A songwriter comes in with their songs, they're very vulnerable, and they're presenting their songs to musicians. So basically what you bring to it, hopefully, and I think, the most successful kind of studio people are people who, it's like a holistic thing where you're going to sit in a chair and a guy's going to play you the song and you're going to learn the song. And you really have to kind of take this whole thing in, listen to the lyrics. What's the song about? What's the melody doing? And then you just have to kind of get into a supportive role and say, there's something going on here, maybe something great or maybe not, but what can I do to enhance it? And usually it's just sort of like taking what they've done and framing it, helping it, staying out of the way when necessary. It's like, it's a listening skill. No, it's more of a listening skill than even a playing skill. So
wow. And that, I mean, what comes to my mind is again the psychologist couch, where you're again listening and trying to draw it out, the best out of somebody, and then resolve conflicts. So do you need you can't have a James Taylor attitude if you're going to be in that kind of role. There's a specific character trait needed for a session guitarist, as you said, in order to do that kind of work?
yeah, it's there is, and I'll use the word. It is both listening and playing, but basically, it's there are things that you just develop over time. First of all, there's like a vocabulary because I basically work in like pop music, folk music, blues music. I'm much more that than a jazz player. And when you're working in that kind of field, there's like really there's a history of guitar playing, and everybody who has played guitar has listened to the history and built on the foundation. So when you hear George Harrison in 1963 and 64, he was listening to Carl Perkins and et cetera, very influenced by that. People of my generation were very influenced by George Harrison, or Keith Richards, or, I could name another. And then as the decades went by, Mark Knopfler, whoever you want to mention. So basically, it's one of these things where you kind of learn the history, and you listen to a lot of records, and Motown records, very important, R&B records. I mentioned Aretha Franklin. I do a lot of R&B stuff as well. So basically, it's like you have vocabulary to draw upon, and hopefully what you do is you also filter it through yourself and you make it your own. But that's kind of how it works. You're not just doing things out of the blue, except occasionally. Actually, that guitar solo that you played, I'm looking at that person playing me. I'm saying, what was the guy doing? What is he thinking? It seems so. The song's a very angst-ridden song, so I kind of went in the direction there. But to answer your question, yeah, we have a vocabulary.
Wow. So much about the session guitarist that I did not know. This is very exciting work. Let's listen to our next excerpt. Wow, fantastic. So you're looking at the backs of records, seeing the different names of the people who are kind of not the main names. You're looking at the different lists of the secondary names, and you get a phone call one day asking you to fill in as a session guitarist from a very prominent person. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I am. I've been very fortunate, and when working with sort of the important people, and it just I don't know what to say. You can't make it happen, except that every time you go out and play music with people, you just try to be a good citizen and show up and be on time or early, and like I said before, listen and be alert and try to be helpful. And then hopefully that leads you to the next gig. Like that's not my personality. I've never made a phone call to say, hey, are you looking for somebody? I just wouldn't even know how to do it. So to the extent that I've worked with people like, Bette Midler, and the thing we're going to, talk about now is Simon and Garfunkel and Paul Simon, which was such a blessing. And, my phone rang one day. You hear people tell the stories all the time where the phone rang and they pick it up and the voice on the other end, not in my case, but certain friends of mine, and the voice on the other end says, "Hi, is Bob there? This is Stevie Wonder." And the first thing that people do is say, yeah, Stevie Wonder, sure. And they hang up. And then Stevie Wonder has to call back 3 or 4 times until he has to say, "Really, Stevie Wonder?" But, it's some random Monday morning, and I had been, working in the field for a long time. And sure enough, the voice on the other end said, "Is Larry there?" I said, "Yeah, it's Larry." Said, "Hey, Larry, this is Paul Simon." I remember he's actually humble. I remember my response when he said that. I said, I was so shocked. And I said, "To what do I owe the honor?" And he said, "Well, I don't know how much of an honor it is, but anyway, like he really wanted to move on from that." But basically they were, this was Simon and Garfunkel tours that happened in 2003 and 2004. He explained to me that, they're putting together a band, and they put together a fantastic 7-piece band, and said, we need, he had a musical director called Mark Stewart, who's a wonderful guitar player, fantastic, still Paul's musical director, and said, we're looking for another guitar player. And then I asked the stupid question. I said, "Well, what are you looking for, actually, in terms of style of playing?" Which was dumb, because anybody else in their right mind would have said, "Wow," but I think he appreciated that I asked it. And he said, "Oh," and he was able to describe to me exactly what he was looking for. And when he told me what it was, which is, he said, I remember exactly what he said. He said, it's Simon and Garfunkel. It's not like a heavy metal music, but somebody could bring a little bit of toughness to it is good. And somebody could play some atmospheric stuff that's good. Or if they played some little stringed instruments, interesting world instruments, that'd be good. I was like, yeah, I do those things. And anyway, then from what I went down and played. Me and Mark Stewart, who I mentioned, and Paul, 3 of us sat in a circle and played guitar for a few hours, and we had a great time. And I was a very lucky recipient of that. So that, led to a few different traveling around the world, playing that unbelievable music for grateful audiences. And we were grateful to be there too. And, that experience, amazing experience, wonderful.
Let's have a listen to our next selection. Wow. Powerful. So this brings us to our philosophical part of the conversation. Quote, "After all the lessons he gave actor Timothée Chalamet, it was an eye-opening experience for Larry Saltzman to see his student on screen and marvel at Chalamet's ability as an actor and take some pride in his own work. Quote, in my own humble way, I'm a small gear in that machinery," he said. "What is rewarding is knowing that in some small way I'm contributing to making a better film." end quote. Larry, you spent your career somewhat in a supporting position as a session guitarist and now music coach for Hollywood film productions. In that quote, you say that you're satisfied to be a small gear in a large machine. Our society values both teamwork and individualistic ambition. If a young Larry Saltzman is listening to our conversation today, which value would you recommend he focus on more?
I think the value is to just be helpful, be helpful. And weirdly enough, I mean, I'm playing music, or when I'm teaching the actors, I'm an educator, I guess. But really, it's about, in any of these situations, I mean, don't we just want people to be helpful to us? I don't care if I'm like in the Whole Foods and I'm looking for something. I want somebody who works there to be helpful to me, and it's really appreciated. And I think whether it's in a professional situation or a friendship situation, it's just really about being helpful to people. And I think that's, if you could live by that, I think you got a good starting point.
Inspiring. Let's listen to our final track of the evening. Fantastic. So,
yeah, just another kid from Queens who got bitten by the. We were crazy about, we were crazy, like I said, about the Beatles and that whole thing. We were crazy about the blues and folk music. It's like so unlikely, these kids from Queens, but that's what was going on.
Are there any questions or comments? Would anyone like to chime in here? Please feel free to. Otherwise, I will. Dr. Davis has something. Hi, Dr. Davis.
Can you hear me now?
We
Good.
can.
All right. Thanks, Larry, for all the insights. I'm from Brooklyn, just down the road.
Mm-hmm.
I see that you're looking in the background at this poster. You played at the Jamaica Jewish Center?
I did.
Oh, good.
I love that. Yeah, I did. That's great. That was my band in high school. That was a cover band.
Is that right?
I love that you picked that out.
Well, everything about New York, Queens, Brooklyn especially, sort of catches my eye. I've been watching for it for a long time. Keep up the good work. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for being here.
Thanks, Dr. Davis. So, final question then. Larry, what do you wish all of us the next time we hear about someone being somebody's sidekick?
Yeah. I don't really know much about Buddhist philosophy or anything like that, but from what I've heard, I think there's some ego thing and I'm really, don't take anything I'm saying now with more than a grain of salt, because I haven't really thought this through. But now that you've asked the question, I do know that, like, when I'm around people, whether it's in professional situations or in life that are not professional situations, that when you say sidekick, so it basically means you've said to yourself, I don't have to be the most important thing here, and I could contribute, and that's going to be very, very rewarding. And I really relate to that. Maybe I wouldn't be comfortable being the front person in these musical situations. I probably wouldn't. And I've been around a lot of people that are so comfortable with that. And I've ascertained, like perceived, that's not me. But there is something very kind of peaceful and wonderful about saying, but here's my role, and it's going to be useful, it's going to be helpful, and I'm into it, and it's going to be rewarding.
Larry, so tell us, if we'd like to hear you perform with these fantastic bands or come to hear you in New York City, tell us, how can we do that?
Yeah, so I'll talk briefly about these clips that you played, and it's terrible. I'm not on Facebook and I don't have a website, but the first one, a few of those are so these are bands that I'm in for fun. This is what we do. We get together and we play. So the Martays, that's MAR-TAYS. And that was like when you saw me and Ira Siegel, my compatriot there, playing the slide guitar, or the James Taylor song in the first one, maybe, which was There's a Well on the Hill, blah, blah, blah. Lo and Behold is a song. Anyway, so we play at a venue called the Cutting Room in New York City on 32nd Street. And we play a few times a year. It's definitely worth seeing. Then the kind of wild man guitar solo, that was the Tony Caniff Band. That's CONNIFF. And we play at the bitter end every once a month on a Monday, usually different Mondays. That's really worth seeing. And then the country-ish one, the Cole Porter song, where I was playing the dobro on my lap, that is a wonderful artist called Janie Barnett. And she's a fantastic singer-songwriter, but also did this beautiful project of playing Cole Porter songs, kind of what they call now Americana style, which means with fiddles and mandolins. And that's really, it was interesting for me to see that, because one of the things that we say about being session musicians is we have to fake our way through so many different things. And sometimes we are just faking our way through it, but we bring a musicality to it. I was kind of cracking up because the other electric guitar stuff is so bluesy and aggressive. And then there I am with the dobro country music instrument on my lap, trying to be supportive and playing. And so, yeah, I think that's what we saw. Janie Barnett, Tony Caniff Band, the Martays. Another group I play with is called the John Miller Group. Stellar New York musicians that, again, get together for fun and play, also play at the venue, the Cutting Room. So those are, if anybody wants to jot that down, I'm sorry I don't have it more together, but those are 4 things that I recommend that come up in New York.
We look forward to hearing you the next time in New York City or online. Thank you so very much to Larry Saltzman.
You're very welcome, and it's a fun way for me to spend a half hour.
So before we go, I'd like to bring you to www.simeonmore.com, where you can find all information about upcoming shows, and let you know that we are in the middle of a sponsorship campaign. For $5 a month, you will receive one Vienna Live Celebrates 5 Years mug, and for $10 a month, you will receive one Vienna Live Celebrates 5 Years mug and one Vienna Live City tote bag. These sponsorships are what Vienna Live depends on to be a public service, and there is also no minimum sponsorship amount. If you click on one-time payment, you can choose any amount you'd like to sponsor Vienna Live, and all sponsorships are very, very, very welcome and important. Thank you so very much. And again, all information about upcoming shows may be found at www.simeonmore.com. Thank you so very much once again to Larry Saltzman. Thank you to Vienna Live's corporate and individual sponsors. Your ongoing support allows Vienna Live to operate as a free music public service. Thanks to my cousin Mike, a marketer from Layer App. If you're an architect or an engineer, they have a really cool tool you should check out. Thanks, of course, most of all to you, our participants who make it all worthwhile, from New York City, New York, and Washington, D.C. Goodbye, and see you next Wednesday.
Bye-bye.